Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is Jonas Reports for the 17th of September. And wow, we got a little bit of excitement. It started the other day as we pushed back towards, resetting and preparing for a new run-up. The same problems existed. We were within that Power Mode 2 cell. We had the retrace down here of the DOC. We were still not able to get the crossover. That's what I was looking for, the green moving above cyan, because that was going to be critical from a push forward standpoint. You still have a decent red. We're in that what I call no spark zone between the -7 and -13.5. I prefer getting those signals where the DOC red drops below -13 and comes back up, because they tend to have a bit more strength. But we kind of expected that this was going to be not one of those that's, the full run, but usually it's that basing until we get a complete turnaround. And the drop of the shakeout really signifies that here at the start. And we have the big separation of the Power Mode 2, which gives a crossover to on the negative move so far. Whenever EDs start to expand, you're going to get your push moves. So if it's in the decline, you get an exacerbated push down. Now, is everything broken? Well, we broke below the 50%, so it's going to be interesting intraday to see if that's able to get returned back above. If not, then yeah, we could potentially see. We already knew this. We talked about it yesterday. That rising 0% of the Morganacci lines really wants to pull price down towards it, and it's just a matter of as soon as any little weakness can be established. And in this case, you had midterm and short-term buyers peeling off towards the end of yesterday, and because it was moving in a nice direction there, and you have really low short interest. So this is all part and parcel of the fact that the realization is coming that unlikely that a stimulus is going to get passed. For politics, we knew that this back in August or whatever was going to take place, that if you didn't get something done back then, that it wasn't going to happen as the election neared, because there's too many points to be won, and they certainly don't want to, provide Trump with a victory of getting money into people's pockets before an election. That would be a no-no. So, and then you have the whole coronavirus thing getting weird. You had the CDC head testifying that masks are better than an actual vaccine. Makes no sense whatsoever. But these are the people running the show, and of course, it doesn't help them that you have the stuff coming out of Sweden that did no lockdowns and nothing, and they have virtually no cases now and herd immunity. So all we've done in the U.S. is just delay that eventuality. And the whole point of it was only supposed to be to reduce the hospitalizations and overflowing your hospitals, and that really isn't a factor. So it's amazing to me the lack of ability for so many in media and that to understand simple statistics. Back in March, if you tested 1,000 people and 500 of them were sick, you had a 50% infection rate. But you get 1,000 people infected, but you did 25,000 or 50,000 tests. Well, now you have an infinitesimal reduction in the infection rate. So there's no correlation to these realities, and in doing so, they're misleading people, because the raw numbers suggest that, in fact, the rate of infection, everything has declined. And this gets back to what I had pointed out to people in Italy way back in the day, that they kept looking at the number of infections rising, and then I said, well, that really wasn't the key metric. It was the number of deaths, and that we could use a factor to multiply. And we talked about that even back when it was happening, and that I was suggesting that the infection rate in Italy was far greater than they even recognized. And in fact, that's what we see, because then they institute all these mask policies and that, and they say, oh, well, look, we're getting fewer infections. Well, you're getting fewer infections because you already had herd immunity. You just didn't realize it, and you're equating it to mass. And it's a fallacy of logic, and this is what we get with a lot of indicators, too. People just making assumptions that don't necessarily correlate. And that creates a problem. It's the same idea that support and resistance line. There's no line that ever supports price when there are no buyers, because only buyers are the ones that are going to buy it. So because it's a psychological thing, if they choose not to buy it, that never really was support. From a NASDAQ standpoint, we can see clearly we're in just this little duckbill with cyan shorts being in the lead. So it's just been short-term buyers that have been maintaining all of this. And as soon as they slide out even a little bit, and of course this is all because Kim Kardashian canceled her Twitter and Facebook. So we all know the real reason, right? Now you would think that with a sell-off in the market that gold would rise. Well, often what happens is over-leveraged individuals have to sell where they're ahead in order to make sure that they're going to remain liquid, and that often causes commodities to take a little bit of a dip between there. But you also have the problem of there's just zero inflation. In fact, we have more deflationary concerns than inflationary concerns. And some of these shine off the euro because, well, frankly, the eurozone is not doing that great, and it's getting worse by the day. But that's relative to the dysfunction in the U.S., so they've kept it elevated. And, it still calls back down to this lower range in the 116 range and lower. So we'll see if it's able to continue to fall back into there as an equilibrium is tried to establish, because there's been currency war going on for quite some time, and the U.S. obviously has won it because the Fed has been ruling everything. And from an oil standpoint, the big bounce back, again, this is just going to be some back and forth, but they want to get towards 50, and it just isn't going to happen given the erratic nature of what's going on with the recovery. I think some of it too was the float on whether the hurricane would cause more damage, which would tighten supply, but that did not happen. So if we look at the chart here, this is again the Power Mode 2 cross that I was working with. Let's slide back to the beginning of the day where we had the big push up. Ended up with some very clean DOC spreads along with similar Power Mode 2 readings. It's nice when everything kind of goes in a consistent pattern. It's still bouncy, choppy back going forth, but at the end of the day, the buy signals and everything in the ranges held up pretty good. We still had these lower algo levels, and so once we got below that 92 level, that left 73, and something we talked about was those 20-point ranges, and we just pretty much filled right in between them as we went down. And then the last straw of it was this little teeny pop-up that took place again with no DOC steel reset, except for all the way back at the beginning of the decline, and then it's pretty much stayed in between there. We had the little pop float, you can see it. Steel goes back below and then crosses above, so it's a little bit bullish. Same thing happened right here when it crossed above. That created a little bit of a bullish run, but at the end of the day, we kept having the rollover on the Power 2s with declining, and that's led to the most recent continued breakdown. And it's going to, again, catch a lot of these novice traders on the wrong side of it, and it gets exciting when that happens and they wake up, and it's going to be an interesting start for some people from a leverage standpoint. And that will exacerbate the move. So unless there's a huge turnaround intraday, I think we would expect to see more days of selling because of the excessive margin that a lot of people have been utilizing. So that'll be worth watching and keeping an eye on. We can go back even to our daily and look at some of the other past levels that still need to be filled from a correction standpoint. So all in all, it's part and parcel of what I think we can expect going into the election, as panic and exuberation keep fighting back and forth, and as extreme as things are, without new money flowing into the market, it'll be interesting to see if they're able to sustain things, simply because without a stimulus, you don't have all these extra people wanting to buy stuff. So that's definitely a factor. As always, though, I will keep putting up charts on the Skype chat. Trade well. We'll talk to you later.